All right. Well, just letting people get their audio settled before we formally start. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, this seems like a good enough mass of people. So hello and welcome everyone to today's coffee talk. Before I hand you off, even though a lot of this will be repeat information at this point in the pandemic, just wanted to go over some of the basics about how to use this system. To start with, your cameras and microphones are disabled, so you don't have to worry about interrupting anybody or us being able to hear you or see you. So as such, if you want to interact today, which is something we highly encourage you to do, the two main ways of doing so are through chat. And if you decide like for comments or a discussion, just make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from that area there. But if you have a question for the panel that you want answered, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A function. You can ask those questions anonymously. You can view existing questions and you can upvote and add your own comments to those. It makes it much more easy for us to manage the Q&A if you put your questions there. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Melanie Gottlieb.
Thanks, Michael. So good afternoon, happy Friday. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, the Deputy Director of Acro, and I'd like to welcome you to another one in our fall coffee break series, which is an opportunity for Acro to discuss really important and timely topics in a much more casual and interactive environment. We know that you are all incredibly busy, and I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day and your week to be here with us. As always, we are hopeful that our technology will not fail us. This is a fairly large Zoom call, and we at Acro, just like everybody else, are working at the mercies of our home Wi-Fi. So if we have any technical issues, please be patient with us. We've been lucky so far. You may use the chat really freely during this webinar, but if you have a question for the panelists, I will ask you to use the Q&A section in order to ask that question, and we will get to that at the end. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please be sure to indicate that in your question so that I can be sure to direct it to the right person. Joining me today are three excellent colleagues who are here to share their pandemic commencement experiences and insights. We have Carol Harrison, who is the Interim Dean of Enrollment Services and Registrar at the College of Southern Maryland. Deborah Baker, Associate Registrar for the Community College of Baltimore County in Maryland, and Ryan Carter, Associate Registrar for Educational Planning at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Before we jump into the discussion, I want to direct you to our COVID practice pages. Next slide. We have combined the resources and the guidance pages into a single reference page that includes all of our COVID-related guidance and alternative practice endorsements for institutions at the time of crisis. It's important to note that more than ever before, as you implement policy and practice changes, whether they be temporary or permanent, you should incorporate clear communication and transparency with all of your stakeholders, which is an approach consistent with your mission and philosophy and consistency of application in the best interests of your students and your campus. Next slide. I also would like to direct you to our COVID-19 Impact Practice Snapshot surveys. We had a series of them in the spring, and you can find them on the COVID guidance page to reference. The first of the fall surveys went out in September, and the results should be available very early this month, and that will be impacts of the 2020 disruptions on work and career. I think you will find that very, very interesting. Next slide. Available in the bookstore today is the Acro Guide to Commencement Ceremonies, which is very on point to what we're talking about today. This guide contains comprehensive information on early commencement, graduation ceremonies in general, serving veterans, and other unique scenarios that might arise. The format and the self-assessment questionnaire will support your planning in the case of disruptions like this year. All right, so I would like to open up to our discussion now with our panelists. And I'd like to start by asking each of you to give a brief introduction on the topic of your spring commencement and your current COVID operations, which will set the stage on your perspective for the rest of the discussion. So if maybe Deb could start.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Debbie Baker. I'm the Associate Registrar at CCBC, as Melanie mentioned earlier, and we held a virtual commencement in spring 2020. Of course, the biggest driver for that decision was an opportunity to give the students a celebration. However, of course, due to the COVID impact, that wasn't able to be done in person. CCBC is a very large community college. We have about 60,000 students between our credit and non-credit students, and we have about 1,000 students each year participate in our one commencement ceremony that we have each spring. And then, of course, they bring their family and friends. It's the crown jewel of CCBC. Our senior staff are very proud of our commencement ceremony, and we have quite a celebration held on one of our campuses. But due to the COVID impact, we still wanted to give students an opportunity and their families to celebrate, so we decided on a virtual commencement. Herf Jones, who we already are engaged with for cap and gown orders, actually approached our Dean of Student Life to attend a presentation on the virtual commencement they were able to help us with. So the Dean of Student Life attended that presentation, and she was quite impressed with what they were able to offer in terms of services and with the pricing. So we used Herf Jones, who then works with two other vendors called Marching Order and Stage Clip, and they helped put the ceremony together. As far as, and we'll get into the details of the ceremony a little bit later, but as far as what we look like currently with COVID at CCBC. So we shut down March 16th. We were closed for 2 weeks, one of which we used as our spring break. All of our classes for spring 2020 were then converted to online classes. So, and then from March to the summer, everybody was remote except for a few of us staff that were coming in every day or every other day. In the summer, we slowly started opening some services to students. And now in fall, we have about 20% of our classes that are in person, 80% that are in a virtual format. Most of our staff are on AD week, so they're in the office one week, they telecommute the opposite week, with the exception of some higher level staff that are in every day. And we are serving students in student services. Our campuses are now open for the students to come in if they choose to get some assistance in person.
Great. Maybe Ryan, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Ryan Carter. I'm the Associate Registrar for Educational Planning here in Knoxville, Tennessee at the University of Tennessee. Just like everybody else, I think it hit fast and furious the first week in March when everyone realized what was going on. And we had spring break about a week later, and we had announced to our students to prepare to quarantine for 2 weeks when you return from spring break. So to take everything with you that you would need for 2 weeks and whatnot. And within a few days, I think right even before spring break hit, we made the decision to go fully online following spring break. Our normal setup with spring ceremonies is we have 9 undergraduate ceremonies, 1 for each undergraduate college. We have 1 for the College of Veterinary Medicine and 1 for the College of Law. I can't tell you how many hours of meetings that we probably all spent for a couple of weeks leading up, right when we decided that an in-person ceremony just wasn't going to be feasible. And we ended up going with marching order as well. And as Deborah said, that we'll get into a little bit more details here in a little bit. But as Deborah said, we did a lot of focus groups, the chancellor of the university, the provost, and even division by division, we did focus groups with various student groups to try to figure out what would be the best, alternative. And we just determined we couldn't let the moment pass. We needed to do something for our graduates and to celebrate our graduates. And our intent has always been to eventually bring the spring students back to campus if they are able to celebrate them in person at an in-person ceremony. Once we got into the summer, we were fully online all summer. We opened our doors back up approximately a week before school started on August 19th, so administrative offices were open. We are probably about 20% online right now. Real quick, we have about 30,000 students at the university, about 23,000 undergraduates, and the rest are at law, veterinary medicine, and at the graduate level. And we have about 20% of our classes are fully online, probably about 30 to 40% are hybrid combination. Students may come on Tuesdays, virtual on Thursdays, vice versa, that sort of thing. And then the remaining 30 to 40% of classes are fully online. Trying to think, did I miss anything? I think that might have covered it, but if I missed anything, I'll probably pick up on it when we go through some of our other topics that we're going to be discussing today.
Okay, hey everybody, Carol Harrison. CSM has about 6,000 credit students and double that for continuing education students. We went online with our students beginning the week of March 16th, which is when Maryland pretty much closed for pretty much everything. We stayed on campus as staff until the 18th of March, and then the president decided to shut the entire institution down starting March 19th. Next week was spring break, and then we came back to remote status the following week. We started talking about graduation. I look back on my calendar about April 9th after, a couple weeks of figuring out, okay, how do we do remote as a staff? And then we started to look at things that needed to happen at the end of the year. So our committee made a few recommendations to our leadership. At the time, I'm sure everybody considered, well, what if we move it to later in the summer? Because, we all thought this will be over by summer, right? Then think about, inviting everybody just to the winter commencement, because certainly by January, it will be over. And then we started, like everyone else, to be contacted by different vendors to say this was possible to do virtually. We, just like University of Tennessee and CCBC, felt it was really important to do something in the moment. Those first couple months, were really difficult. We were all missing each other and we needed something to celebrate, and we felt we needed to give that to our students. So ultimately, by about the middle of April, we decided we were going virtual. We moved our commencement a couple of weeks because we were supposed to have our ceremony on the 15th of May. We moved it to the 29th of May just to give ourselves a little bit more time, because there is some things that you need to have your students do to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that during the ceremony, but needed a bit more time. And what was interesting is we opened it up to all our students, just not the people who said they were going to participate in the ceremony. And we added probably another 150 students to that virtual ceremony, which was interesting. And CSM also decided we invited all those spring students, thinking that the winter ceremony would be in person. So we invited them to come back for the winter ceremony. So we'll talk a little bit later about future things that we need to think about.
Thanks so much for each of you sharing that. I think that blends really beautifully into the next topic. To effectively deliver a virtual event, it really does require some technology, and I think each of you mentioned some technical solutions. Can you talk about the solutions that you explored, the path you took, and maybe why, and did it work as you expected? And we'll start with Debbie.
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, Herff Jones had reached out to our Dean of Student Life to offer their services and show what they had to offer in terms of virtual graduation. So that's where we started. And I don't know, I'm under the impression we didn't even look at any other vendor. I think they just impressed them right off the bat in terms of quality and pricing. So we went with Herf Jones. They work with two other vendors, one which is called Marching Order and one which is called Stage Clip. And Marching Order does some database management as we're sending student information in, and then the Stage Clip company is who pieced the production together. We used some pieces of the ceremony that were taped from the previous year, and I'll talk more about that once we get to the ceremony ourselves. And then we also taped some new live information then that was all put together to make the entire ceremony. It worked very well. We offered a link on our website the day of so that, family and friends can join in. Certainly the students could access that link pretty easily. And then any of the community members that might have wanted to watch it, board members, faculty and staff who are generally participating in the ceremony. So we offered that link publicly on our website, so whoever wanted to join in. We didn't have any technical glitches. Things seemed to work at, we work through our student life office for, they were sort of the go-between. If students had questions, I would help them. Our Dean of Student Life was the go-between between myself and Herf Jones and Stage Clip and the actual production. And although it was hectic, I think at the beginning, once we decided and we knew what the next steps were, because we had a pretty short timeline, everything fell into place. And in the end, we had a very nice production to share.
At the University of Tennessee, we ended up going with Marching Order. It just seemed like they had what we were looking for. We are fortunate enough here at UTK that we have a central production crew on campus, and we had a number of videographers and whatnot. So we did all of the taping of the speeches from our chancellors and our president, provost, and the deans, the guest speakers, the student speakers and whatnot. And we did everything in-house, and then Marching Order kind of put that together with the slide presentation that we ended up going with. And with Marching Order, what we liked about them was it allowed each student to personalize their slide. So it wouldn't just be their name on the slide. They wanted to upload a picture, upload a quote, something along those lines to kind of make it a little bit more than what we normally do actually in a live ceremony where they're just reading their name and walking across the stage. Not that that's substituted from being able to do that by any stretch of the imagination, but it seemed like we got a lot of strong feedback regarding that. Of course, we had to double check the slides to make sure that everything was appropriate and whatnot. But we had quite a few people on campus within the colleges. At UTK, the University Registrar's Office oversees the undergraduate ceremony in the fall. But each of the colleges oversee their own ceremonies in the spring. So it wasn't just my office that had to do a lot of the heavy lifting with this. A lot of the administrative and offices and the dean's offices throughout the university had to or supported the mission of what we were trying to do. And everyone really stepped up. We really appreciate everything that we did. We ended up having a ceremony for each of the colleges, as well as College of Law, College of Veterinary Medicine. We had, I believe it was a single message from our chancellor and our provost for each ceremony. And I believe you can still locate those ceremonies if anybody would like to see what we did at commencement.utk.edu. And we did a neat thing where we had some of our, I guess, more well-known alumni come back or virtually sing our school song. And our chancellor is very talented and she plays the piano. So our chancellor played the piano as some of our more famous alumni sung our school song. And then each of the ceremonies had about a 5 to 10 minute speech from the dean, from a guest speaker, from a student speaker. Let's see what else. It pretty much, if there was any cadets commissioning into the military, we had the commissioning ceremony within each college's ceremony. It really mirrored everything that we did in person, except for the processional in and out with the faculty and walking across the stage. So what we also did is we started a hashtag. I think it was hashtag UTGrad2020, and we highly encouraged all of our graduates to upload pictures or comments or something along those lines to Twitter and Instagram and all that kind of good stuff. And that also gave an opportunity to their academic advisors to send a personalized message to them as well. Says one of the things we thought about is, you know, we like to think ourselves, as we all do on our campuses, as families. And with the social distancing, you know, we lost our family, or we couldn't be, you know, arm's distance from our family. So we wanted to try to make it as personalized of an experience as possible. And we really thought the hashtag on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm not the most tech savvy. I'm not on Twitter, not on Instagram, so don't get me. I'm pretending to know what I'm talking about right now. But from what we've heard, it was a big hit. Let's see. I've got some notes here. So I guess just to wrap it up, we did decide to go with the marching order company just because it offered exactly what we were looking for, and it allowed us to piecemeal what we were looking for. We didn't have to buy an entire package. We could say we want this, this, and that, but we don't want this, this, and that. So we thought it was the most cost effective and gave us the opportunity to celebrate our students the best way we can.
And I can echo what Deb and Ryan have said. We also went with Marching Order. They were a great company to work with. And what's amazing is, I don't know how many graduations they did across the country, but when we spoke with them earlier this week, there's only like 8 people in that company. So they did amazing stuff with a very small staff. Another thing that we did is we worked with Jostens. Because I'm sure, as you can imagine, we all saved a lot of money doing it virtually. So we wanted to send a gift to graduates. So we decided to go with the cap and tassel. For students, at least at CSM, we allow them to decorate their cap. So students were decorating their cap. You know, the tassel is so important because it has the year that you graduate. And it was just a way to acknowledge, you know, that, you know, because if anything, the most important part, I think, is your cap and tassel. So that was another thing that we did with our vendor, and they mailed that for us. So we didn't have to agree with mailing things. So that was for vendors, you know, again, it was great that they were there for us, you know, immediately. So.
Real quick, one of the cool, I remembered something as you were speaking, Carol. One of the coolest things I saw were what somebody uploaded. A lot of students came back to campus, put on their regalia, and took their photographs by the more famous parts of campus and whatnot. But one of the neatest things I saw was one of our graduate students had her mother hood her. And I just thought that was really neat. I mean, they made the best of it. And it was just a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, our students did the same thing.
That's really cool. I know that I saw on social media lots of graduates in gowns in unusual places. And I think students did take the opportunity to do interesting things. So this spring, all of this stuff that we did involved some sort of a practice or a policy change. Can you talk about some of those changes that you had to make to accommodate this environment as it shifted underneath your feet?
Yes, the biggest change for CCBC was our, ironically enough, our last date to apply for May graduation was March 15th, which happened to fall on a Saturday or Sunday this year, but March 16th is when we got the email to shut down and go home. And so we had lots of graduation applications that had just come in, and probably several more that we knew would be trickling in the next few weeks for students who might have not gotten them in right on time. So we moved our graduation application date back. We just went ahead and moved it back all the way till May 31st, given that it was going to be virtual, because CCBC does typically hand out diplomas at the actual commencement ceremony. And given that we did not have that crunch this time around, we were able to give them the leeway to actually get their degree confirmed if they had missed the deadline, or if we had, they were in a financial pinch and couldn't pay the graduation fee. It allowed students a little bit of wiggle room to breathe in both ways. We also, we had some students with some hardships, given their parents lost their jobs amongst this, or they lost their jobs amongst this. So we were able, through our the foundation at our college, to cover some of the students' needs in terms of graduation. So moving back the application deadline was the biggest, and we just moved it right back till May 31st, which is our confirmation date. Also, ironically enough, currently we only take paper applications for graduation, but we had already been thinking about the self-service option in our banner system, and now COVID has forced our hand at that, which has been a positive. So we are in the mix of doing an online application that students can submit online and pay online. But with that said, students were either mailing in their applications with a check or money order, or they were coming to the bursar's office to hand in their application with their money. Well, when you're shut down for several months and you don't have staff to man the mail, that was quite a task for us to overcome. So we changed some payment policies and were able to enact some electronic payment policies for the students, and that's been working well. It's I keep saying we're kind of in a hybrid. We're not quite all electronic yet, but we're not all paper-based like we were a few months ago. So we're in this in-between stage, moving toward a total electronic system. So that will be an eventual policy change, but it did come out of COVID. Those were, we also offered pass-fail grades, which was a big change in culture for CCBC. That's not typically an option. That was a lot of maneuvering between my supervisor, the registrar, and the academic side, making sure it would appropriately work on transcripts, making sure how that might impact GPA. So that was a big change in policy. That was only offered for spring. It was a one-time deal. Once the students made their decision, they could not come back and say, oh, never mind, now I got a B. And I think, it was a done deal. Once you said you were taking the pass-fail, we stuck with it. The other significant policy was, if we had a lot of withdrawals, students not being able to flip over to completely online. So for those students, there was a period of time, if they took action, that we were able to offer them some money to come back and re-enroll at another time. They did get the W on their transcript, but at least they had some financial backing to come and take another course, or retake the course they had a withdrawal from. So those have been our biggest policy changes.
At UTK, I'll start with what Deborah left off of. We also created a policy that allowed students to change their grade modes from A to F to pass, fail, and we created a new grade mode that at UTK, we normally only have pass-fail. A passing grade is a C or better, and a no credit or fail is anything below C. So we created a new grade as a CR, a credit, and that would be for any grade between a D- and a C-. And that would allow students to if there's not a minimum grade requirement for a specific graduation requirement, but they were worried about whether they were going to fail the course or not, that would still allow them to receive credit for the class, complete the requirement, and not have a negative impact on their GPA. We too did some partial form of refunding if the students did decide to withdraw, and that's both for housing as well as their actual schedule, courses, tuition, and whatnot. That was the other major thing we did was at UTK, they actually can apply to graduate up until about a week or two after the term ends. I don't know if this is the case with a lot of universities, but we always have some stragglers that at the end of the term didn't know that they had to apply to graduate, or for any number of reasons. So we keep the application window open a little longer. So we didn't have to change that, but what we did do is we usually have about 3.5 weeks after grades post to confer the degrees, after which it closes, and anybody who applies at a later time would have to have their degree conferred at the next conferral date, which this past spring would have been in August. But what we did was we extended that window for about 2 to 3 more weeks, because we have students that do take courses over at the local community college in their last term, or they may have gotten incomplete for any number of reasons. So we wanted to allow them a couple of extra weeks to satisfy the incomplete or get that transcript from the third-party institution, because we may have been operating fairly, even though we weren't on campus, and we were essentially open without being on campus, there was a lot of schools that weren't open, or there were significant delays on getting transcripts to us because they would need to go into their campuses to print transcripts. So sometimes it might have been 3 to 5 days to process a transcript and send it, but we were running into some students who were encountering weeks to get their transcripts. So we extended the degree conferral deadline by a few weeks. We normally order all of our diplomas after the degree conferral deadline ends. So when we know there's no more applicants, we've either conferred all degrees or canceled anybody who didn't meet requirements. We then the next day order diplomas, provided they don't have any financial holds, but I don't need to go into that. So what we did was we not only did not wait until the end of our normal degree conferral period, about a week after, the majority of our degrees are conferred within about a week of grades posting. And then the last 2 weeks, we're talking about 15 to 20% of the stragglers. We went ahead and changed our process to go ahead and order all the diplomas about a week after graduation or after grades posted. So instead of about 2 months after the term ended, some students were getting the majority of students were getting their diplomas about 5 weeks afterwards. Of course, that didn't, make up for everything that happened, but we did receive some strong feedback for that. And then we waited about every 3 to 5 days and made another diploma order. So after that first diploma order, we didn't wait until the extended degree conferral timeline was over. We continued to order diplomas basically on a weekly basis to get the diplomas to our students as quickly as possible. As far as the ceremony itself, since we had to go virtual, at UTK, the students actually purchased their regalia. It's about $69, $70. And once students learned that it was going to be a virtual ceremony, we got quite a few students wanting to return their regalia and get a full refund. So without hesitation, we of course, normally they would have to have a special circumstance to return the regalia. But this time it was no questions asked. We fully refunded it as long as it came back the way it was sent to them. So I think that, grade mode changes, extended the degree conferral period, the returning of the regalia, Those were the primary policy changes. I mean, there was all kinds of other stuff going on campus that my boss and others within my office had to do, but luckily, I guess, I could focus on the commencement part of it. So.
So CSM did very much the same similar things that both of you all already talked about. Fortunately for us, we were piloting an online graduation application that we started in January, thank God. So we thinking maybe a few students would use that, ended up being 50% of how our applications came in. And then for the summer, it actually increased to 75%. So that is the way, and talk about, the shift we thought would be very difficult because our advisors weren't real keen on an online graduation application, but it was interesting how this pandemic has made us change processes that will become permanent. So I'm excited as a registrar. It makes our life easier if they apply directly online. We extended the deadline for the application, and also allowing anyone who wanted to participate in the ceremony to participate regardless of what they had thought about they wanted to do in February. Obviously, once the pandemic hit, a lot of students were like, you know what, I need to celebrate because I need something to look forward to. So I think that's why we saw increases in our attendance. We also went to a PF grade. The challenge with pass-fail grade was that we had to change all of them manually. So unlike UT, there was definitely a delay in ordering our diplomas because it took us a while to get all those grade changes, and then you had to go in after that to do review because all of us do all of that because we're probably a smaller office than UT. But at CSM, we have about the last 4 years gone back and kind of thrown a net out to see, did anybody forget to apply? So we were used to taking care of students if they had forgotten to apply, or telling them, saying, hey, we went ahead and are going to issue your credential because you forgot. So we're used to doing those things. And again, I think it'll be interesting to see if that changes for many of us. If we decide, okay, students are going to apply late, we know they're going to, let's go ahead and not have them wait till the next conferral cycle. I'll be curious to see if that changes for a lot of us after this.
Thanks, Carol. That's great. Really, really interesting to hear about all of that. And I think that your policy changes all kind of line up with a lot of what we heard around campuses and around some of the Acro recommendations in policy guidelines of just being as flexible as one could possibly be. So it sounds like that worked out. I want to just get back for a moment about the actual ceremonies themselves. I know we gave a little bit of detail, but I wonder if there are other special details or more details that you want to share in terms of what your event looked like.
Sure. I had mentioned earlier, there were several pieces to some that we taped ourselves, some that were pre-taped, that Stage Clip put together for us. So I'll just kind of talk about the order of our ceremony and what that looked like. So we did have a procession at the beginning of our ceremony. We were able to use the 2019 procession that we had on tape, and we used that at the beginning of our 2020 ceremony. So at least it it got students excited as the ceremony begun. We also were able to include the Star Spangled Banner, and again, we have a CCBC chamber singers that typically perform at the ceremony, so we were able to use 2019's version of the Star Spangled Banner from the CCBC chambers and incorporate that into the 2020 ceremony. We had our Dr. Kurtenitis, who's the president of CCBC, our communications department, taped her president's address that she typically does at the beginning of the ceremony. So we had a president's address during the virtual. We also were able to tape some greetings from our CCBC Board of Trustees. Often a few members of the Board of Trustees are at our ceremony. They sit up on the stage with senior staff and one generally speaks. So we were still able to offer that by pre-taping it ahead of time. We also have a student that's recognized every year as the President's Distinguished Graduate, and they speak at the ceremony as well, and it's usually the highlight of the ceremony. They're typically dynamic speakers and you know, blow the roof off the house with their speech. So we were gratefully able to have that student who was chosen in 2020 come in, be taped and with their speech and add that to the ceremony. Then we did the recognition of graduates, and as Ryan spoke, there were slides of the graduates, and now that responsibility was on the graduates. You know, we had a lot of communication with them, and Herb Jones had a lot of communication with them on, you know, they had strict deadlines, even though a lot of times our CCBC ourselves can be lenient with students and do things last minute. You know, a third party that's working with several different colleges and has a timeline. So the students really, if they wanted a slide, they really had to stick with the deadlines, and they got plenty of reminders and communication about that, but they were able to include a picture. A lot of them were in their cap and gowns because we were able to have Herb Jones mail the cap and gowns directly to the students. So a lot of them were in their cap and gown. They had a picture of themselves that had their name and their degree. If the student did not end up sending in a personalized picture, they still did have a slide with their name and their degree type. Also, and of course it was pre-recorded, but it went along with the slides. Their names were announced, so it wasn't just the slides. That there was an announcement behind the slides to announce their name, just as it would be as if they were walking across the stage in person. And then Dr. Curtinitis did the presentation and the official conferring of the degrees, having them move their tassel, and gave some closing remarks. And it was really well received. I thought the flow of it was really good. It was as close as to in person as we could get as far as what we were able to incorporate, because we had some taped examples from the previous year. And they also did the campaign with the hashtag as well, and I think that was very well received by the students.
I don't want to take up too much time because I kind of touched a little bit on it. I would encourage you to go to commencement.utk.edu because it does show kind of how we celebrated. You can go to each of our colleges' individual virtual ceremonies. You know, there's some colleges chose to do theirs a little differently. The order's a little different, that sort of thing. But you can also see some of the other videos that were uploaded that was more of an overarching like the singing of the alma mater and whatnot. It shows some of the social media uploads to the hashtag that we had generated. One thing I do want to just take hopefully just about 30 seconds on. One of the things, because we did save some money on the ceremony, we did have a little money, and what we did was we sent out gift boxes to all of our graduates, and that was kind of a way to kind of make it a little more smooth, or, you know, make it a little easier on our students. And in the gift boxes, we gave them a program, because we printed a program like we always would have for the spring ceremony. We gave, in it was their mortarboard and their tassel. In it was also a UTK pen, a little, you know, better than a Bic, but not, you know, like a $50 pen or anything like that. A pen and paper, a pad of paper, a poster with a seal, the university seal on it, and a couple of stickers that they could put on their laptops or their cars or something along those lines and stuff. And that was a huge hit, a absolutely enormous hit. So that was, I guess, it definitely eased the transition. Of course, we got a lot of questions going, well, I got this gift box, but I didn't get my diploma. And then, of course, we had to give them the timeline for the diplomas and when we were going to be confirming their degrees and whatnot. So, like I said, commencement.utk.edu. You'll get a good idea of what we did. And also, if you have the resources and could put together some kind of gift box this fall, I think that would just go over like gangbusters.
So CSM, very, again, traditional, just like CCBC and UTK. The one thing that we did do that I love, that's part of our ceremony every time, is we do a faculty salute. And they just tip their cap and gowns to students. And they probably had, I don't know, somewhere between 30 to 50 faculty and staff tip their hats and salute the graduates. And it was just really personable. Everybody was doing it in a different place, whether it was their house, outside, on campus. And it added that personal touch to the ceremony. I can't emphasize enough, as I look back over planning it, how much students want that in-person moment and they want their name read. We decided not to do that in our spring ceremony. And that's something that it's good to hear that other places emphasize that part of the ceremony, because that is really, if you all think about it, that is the most important thing to students, is that's the part that they remember. We had, again, the student speaker was absolutely probably one of the best student speakers I've ever heard. Graduation, although I've been to countless ones, this one still choked me up. I still cried. So you don't lose that really significant moment in those students' lives. It's still very emotional. And I think, if anything, that was surprising to me. I didn't know if it would get that personal, but it did. And you can still do that virtually. And I thought that was, that's what we wanted, and we were able to do that.
Carol, as a follow-up, I know that when you were trying to figure out what you were going to be doing, that you did a lot of research around drive-through graduations. And I know none of you had that example, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what those looked like and what you learned about that.
Sure. So in Maryland, at the time, doing any kind of in-person wasn't a possibility. So doing it in May, nothing had reopened. But what we started to see, and I think this probably happened across the country, is when high schools were graduating, they did a drive-up graduation, which is, they kind of said, okay, we're going to put a dais in the parking lot, and they put a tent over it, because all of us are doing this in June and July when it's super hot. Actually, I got this idea and spoke with some of the staff at Brookdale Community College in New Jersey. Each family was given 10 minutes to drive up. You had one car. Some got really creative and got a party bus. So, hey, like a whole bunch of family could come. The student would get ready to walk across the stage. The people on the stage would be like ready. So everybody's got their camera ready, and students names would be read, walk across the stage, receive their diploma cover, and have that moment and that captured moment by their family. Some students even showed up with their furry friends, and their furry friends were introduced along with the student and walked across the stage with them. So it became extremely personable to students. And it was something that actually, I think as we go back to look into the future, because in Maryland, especially down where I am, all high schools, this is what they did. They did that personal moment for the students. For some of us that could take a couple of days, but it was really important for students to have their in-person moment. And once things started to open up a little bit more across the country, and if you had waited to have your ceremony, you could have done this, or some schools had the virtual and then they decided to do the in-person later when their states opened up. So I think it's a great, let's go a little bit farther, and we continue to get creative over the past 6 months. And I really love the drive-up graduation idea, and it's something to consider depending on where your state is in terms of comfortability of gathering and being socially responsible.
Thanks for that, Carolyn. I love that idea. And I think it's really creative. And I think it's interesting that there are going to be a lot of students who have had that experience now. And so that may be something to note as you plan future ceremonies, that there might be some considerations there in terms of expectations. Also, I just want to remind folks that there are links to all of those ceremonies and references in the chat. We've posted them there if you'd like to take a look. I'd like to get back thinking about how students and their families reacted and felt about your commencements. And I'm going to work in one of the Q&As that are already here as well, because I have heard a couple of you say your ceremonies were well received. And so if you can talk about what the students' reactions were, and if you have any solid feedback, did you do any surveying? Do you have any data that's hard data that you can share? Or is it at this point just sort of more general?
So for CCBC, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We did not do a follow-up survey or have any kind of statistics to share. However, I felt once we reached out to the students and the virtual was an option, we weren't really sure how many people might bite in terms of really turning in pictures and, you know, wanting to decorate their slides. Because of course that's a little bit more, you know, work on them and uploading and sending all these links and all, but the most of the students did. The majority of the students participating in the ceremony did. So I think that speaks to the importance that it played for them, and that you know, they were happy to have some type of acknowledgement. I think the sort of the opposite side of that is, again, because there were a lot of hard deadlines, which I'll admit at CCBC, you know, we around graduation, we of course bend over backwards to be able to allow them to participate in all when it's in our hands. But then there's these outside vendors. So I think the students that may have not met the deadline then and just simply were not able to, when I say participate, then give their information and picture and all, I think the heightenedness of the being upset was more just because that whole period, you know, everyone's emotions were heightened. But most of the students participated, most of the students provided information, and I think overall, you know, there was a lot of positive feedback with that.
I think, you know, same thing at UTK. I think we all went through the 5 stages of grief and disappointment and frustration, all that kind of good stuff. I don't know if those are parts of the 5 phases, but I think once people got through the initial disappointment and realized what was going on in the world, I think, you know, the vast majority, and once we announced the virtual ceremony and gave the students the opportunity to personalize slides and create the hashtag, and they saw what their fellow students were doing and saw it as an opportunity to be creative. And that was one of the biggest joys I had out of, if there was joy of going to a virtual ceremonies, is to see how creative our students and how creative young people are. And because I mean, it's, you know, I haven't done it in a while, but every once in a while, if I was having a bad day, I would open up that hashtag and kind of just go through some of the slides, and it would put a smile on my face because the students really took the ball and ran with it. And I think they really showed how their maturity and the leaders that we hope we helped craft and who they're going to be going forward. And we, of course, you can't make everybody happy. We did receive, you know, upset parents, some upset students. You know, I spent all this money and now you're going to take this away from me. And, you know, the first couple of calls were real difficult to get through. And then you just had to understand that they weren't mad at you, they were mad at the situation, and they just needed to be heard. And once we kind of started realizing, we just, you know, let them talk, let them get mad, let them kind of, I don't know, tucker themselves out, I guess, a bit, and just let them get it off their chest, and then just kind of come back with, you know, we're following CDC, state and local health guidelines, and this just isn't something that we're comfortable doing, especially a school like Tennessee that has students from around the world, and parents from around the world would be coming in if the travel ban, you know, that was before we knew that there was going to be travel bans and all that kind of good stuff. So I think initially people were angry and frustrated and disappointed and stuff. But by the time the ceremony rolled around, and since then, I think it was the vast majority of the feedback was very positive. And I know we're running short on time. I just want to kind of jump in on that, mention that UTK actually just announced about 2 hours ago, we're going to be having in-person commencement this fall. We are, instead of one undergraduate ceremony, we're going to break it up and limit it to 200 students per ceremony. Fortunately, we have a basketball arena that's big enough to accommodate guests, and we're going to limit guests to 4 per. So we'll have about 1,000 people in the arena, socially distanced, mask required, no handshakes walking across the stage. There's still a bunch of logistics that still need to be worked out. But we are at the moment moving forward with in-person commencement. And I've already received, that was just announced, and I've gotten so many phone calls and emails already that the fall graduates are so happy. And we're also inviting our spring and summer graduates to come back. And that's to be determined. You know, a lot of them have jobs now, a lot of them don't live in the area. We don't know how many are going to take us up on the offer, but we're going to have as many ceremonies as we need to make sure we celebrate our students from the spring and summer, because we told them we would do it, and now we're going to do it. And hopefully they'll be able to come back and celebrate, and hopefully we get everything under control here in the next couple of months, and we'll go from there. The last thing is the ceremonies are going to be before Thanksgiving, the week before Thanksgiving, so about 2 weeks before the term ends, because we're going virtual after Thanksgiving. We're not going to have our students back to campus. So that's one of the logistical things that we have to worry about, is which ceremonies are at what times and on what days, because we certainly don't want our fall students to have to make a choice of going to class or going to their ceremony. So still a lot of logistics to be worked out, but we, if anybody would like to get in touch with me after the Zoom or next week, you can find me on the UTK website very easily, and I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the further details about what we're considering and what are the logistical hurdles for that.
And to talk about student feedback, again, I can't echo enough how appreciative they were. Students ordered organized watch parties, so they watched it with their families, which I thought was really, really cool. And also, like Ryan, my institution officially decided that we're going to do a drive-up type of graduation ceremony, so the students get their, their 5 minutes walking across the stage and having that moment with their families in winter if all things are good. We'll do that in January. We'll do it over 3 days because we want to do it at each campus, because we have 3 campuses at the College of Southern Maryland. So it's interesting how all of us this week started to see things starting to turn a little bit differently for ceremonies.
Thanks, Carol. We're going to extend the time just a little bit because I want to get to a couple of the Q&As, and we are at time. So we're just going to go.
Uh-oh. May have lost.
Maybe just a few minutes over, but I'd like to ask maybe rapid fire. He had a printed program in his. Did anyone else do a printed program?
I wish we would have thought of that. That's a great idea. No, we did not think to do that.
We did not have a printed program, but we did have we did create a program, and there was a PDF program on the website along with the link, so students could see their name in print. And it looked just as, it was in the entire program, just as it would be if we were handing them out at the live ceremony.
Excellent. Excellent. And then actually, it looks like Ryan. Another quick one. Were your commencements a combination of synchronous and asynchronous, or were they totally asynchronous? Just to clarify, as you described them, was there anything going on synchronous and live?
No, nothing was live at CSM.
All asynchronous. Okay, great. What vendors did you use for social media filters, if you did use any?
I honestly do not know if we used those. I know we had our Office of Special Events who oversee or assist with organizing the spring ceremonies. And of course, they assist us with the fall ceremony as well. They were really in charge of a lot of that. And I know that my division has a very active presence online, on social media and whatnot. So I'm just not sure if we used a company or if we just did it in-house. Sorry.
That is okay. All right, and I think that that's going to have to wrap us up today, unless there's a final thought that any of you want to share, because I know you had lots of notes and we ran a little close to time. Any final thoughts you want to share? Anything you didn't get to say that you really want to emphasize?
I think the one thing is working with a vendor marching order, you had hard deadlines. I think Deb talked about us, and somebody else had control. That was very hard for us because we are the one who control the data. So you have to be really careful, more so than ever, dotting your I's, crossing your T's. Because if we allowed one student to slip past that deadline, that means things got missed. Got missed was a student's name. At the end, we rolled all the names at the end of the ceremony, and her name wasn't there. We made it up to her. One of our VPs within hours was at her house with a gift bag of swag, of CSM swag. But giving over that control to somebody else's deadlines was difficult. And we definitely learned that we're going to have to stick to our deadlines, and because that's not normal SOP for us.
I think it was just kind of follow up on a question that was just a few minutes ago about feedback and whatnot. And I think the biggest piece of feedback is the students felt appreciated and recognized. And even though it didn't work out their last semester on campus the way that they thought it was always going to work out, they really did deep down appreciate the role that we played in making the best out of a terrible situation. So if you do have the capacity to have a virtual ceremony, I strongly recommend it because it will pay dividends in the long run.
Well, thank you all for that. Michael, if you would bring up the last of the slides. I just wanted to share with you all. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks to all of our presenters, to Ryan, to Deborah, and to Carol, because we're all really busy, and I appreciate very much that you took time out of your day at the end of the week to share with us. I want to also share that we are doing a lot over the next several months. Our meetings have been suspended in the near term, our in-person meetings, and we know that you and your staff continue to have professional development needs. And so we have packed the schedule with mostly free programming that will help you to do your job now and hopefully stay sane doing them. So we've launched a new communication called This Month at Acro. I hope that you find it in your inbox, and that will share with you monthly what we have planned. The next several coffee breaks are open for registration, and we have many more in the works. You can expect to see free virtual content throughout the fall. Acro's here to help you and your institutions. If you missed the upcoming at Acro or you're not sure what's going on, please check the calendar on our website at any time. We keep it up to date. Next slide. I'd like to call some special attention to a recently announced mental health series. And I want to say that this series has come out of our conversations with our members. Everyone I am talking to is stretched. We know how incredibly hard you were all working. You worked through the spring, bending over backwards, reinventing your jobs, and trying to do the right thing for your students and your institutions. And here we are in the fall, and you have to keep doing it. And you're being asked to, and we hear you. So we hope that you will tune in to these 4 free webinars that are really directed at you. And at trying to help you stay sane and healthy in this environment that just is not stopping for us. Next slide. Quick promo for our SEM conference. The SEM conference will happen virtually this year. This is our first fully virtual meeting. I am really excited. The content is very strong. Registrations are happening now. It is October 28th to 30th, and we hope that you will join us. And next slide is a final reminder that when you are facing challenges for your institution and the guidance needs to be tailored very specifically, we hope that you'll think about Acro Consulting for a convenient and affordable solution. We know right now that you need to deploy every possible tool in your toolbox to drive student success and enrollment health. Please contact consulting@acro.org or go to the website and complete the contact form to get started. Thank you so much for joining us and have a fantastic weekend.